Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named From Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The story picks up right where the first season left off, with a radio tower built by the joint efforts of the townspeople, who plan to use it to communicate with the outside world for rescue. But unfortunately, a sudden storm has devastated their efforts, and the townspeople can only recover from the damage. The occasional sparks of electricity have thrown the colony house into chaos. Many residents believe this is a punishment from the monsters. The man who happened to be trapped in the secluded town, Jim, is incredibly frustrated. Though he managed to connect the radio, the information coming from the other end is rather peculiar. The voice knows Jim's name, and it even warns him that his wife shouldn't be digging in the basement. Jim shakes off the ominous feeling and is about to go inside when he sees a tour bus driving into town. So he rushes inside to announce this. The atmosphere becomes tense. Donna, the owner of the colony house, regains her composure and finds the deputy sheriff, Kenny, advising him that now that the sheriff is not here, he must shoulder the responsibility and save the bus passengers who have ventured into town, or they certainly won't survive the night. On the bus, a passenger named Elgin suddenly wakes from a nightmare. As if he's had a premonition, he yells for the driver to stop. The bus driver remains calm, explaining they've only taken a wrong turn and will be back on track soon, so there's no need for alarm. But as Elgin becomes more agitated, she reluctantly pulls over at the diner. The passengers, weary from a day's journey, are relieved to stretch their legs. Soon the heavy rain stops. With the help of the medical girl Mari, the agitated Elgin gradually calms down. When asked why he was so agitated, the man admits he had a terrifying dream, but doesn't elaborate on the details. By now, some townspeople have approached, advising the tourists to spend the night in the diner. But the bus driver asserts that they plan to leave town as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Jim has returned home to check on his wife's digging progress, only to find the hole blocked by collapsed debris. He got a bad feeling, as if the warning from the radio had come true. His wife, Tabitha, had been determined to uncover the town's power source secret by digging to see where the electrical wires led. She unexpectedly fell into a tunnel due to a collapse. It was there she discovered the underground wires were actually disconnected. Suddenly, the mysterious man, Victor, appeared and informed her that this was a lair for the monsters. They had to leave right away. Looking at the pitch-black tunnel, Tabitha shivered. Victor repeatedly whispered not to make any noise. If they wake the monsters, it's all over. He was led here through a tree hole by a little boy in white, specifically to rescue Tabitha. Suddenly, a suitcase on the ground caught her attention. Upon opening it, she found a woman's nightgown. Tabitha couldn't comprehend why such an item would be in the tunnel, but she swallowed her curiosity and continued to follow Victor. The dark tunnel felt like the mouth of a beast preparing to devour their parts. Tabitha had the nagging feeling something was watching her, but soon both were shocked to find they had entered a clearing filled with old furniture, with several desiccated corpses propped up nearby. When a creepy doll appeared, Victor seemed triggered, trembling, and the doll had clearly stirred his painful memories. This time, it was Tabitha's turn to comfort him, using words, but not muscles. She then pulled him along to continue searching for an exit. Before long, a towering pile of stones came into view. As they stared in wonder, a sphere rolled out from a nearby cave, destroying the stone pile. Intrigued, Tabitha shone her flashlight towards the cave, catching a fleeting glimpse of a skinny figure. Then, to their horror, the corpses on the ground began to move. Victor shouted that they were waking up. Tabitha was terrified and suddenly felt a large puddle beneath her feet. In sync, they crawled following the direction of the water flow, finally finding the cave entrance and escaping from the hellish tunnel. However, Tabitha's husband, Jim, was unaware that his wife had escaped. He was trying to clear the debris blocking the hole. Their daughter, Julie, rushed home and realized what was happening when she saw her father's efforts. Jim reassured her and told her they needed help from others. So Julie ran to where the tourists were resting, pleading for them to rescue her trapped mother. Despite the bus driver trying to stop her, two young tourists decided to lend a hand. Just then, Donna and Kenny arrived at the scene. They didn't immediately inform about the impending crisis. Instead, they opened the doors of the diner and invited the tourists to have a cup of tea and rest. Donna took the opportunity to tell the bus driver about the monsters that appear in the town at night. However, the driver dismissed Donna as a greedy businesswoman. At this moment, Elgin, supported by Mari, decided to step out of the bus for some fresh air. Suddenly, he began to convulse on the ground. The deputy sheriff, Kenny, rushed to his aid, but he was anxious and didn't know what to do. Jim, who was working hard to rescue his wife, finally got some help. One of them was the town's bartender, and the others were the helpful tourists. The group reassured him that they would quickly clear the hole, but they had to endure the falling debris while laboriously clearing the rubble. Seeing the collapse getting worse, they had to stop their work and plan to retreat for rest. Unexpectedly, the house shook violently. Kenny and the others in the diner watched as Jim's house rapidly collapsed. A piece of wood blocked Jim's body, but it seemed he was not in life-threatening danger. Faint cries for help could be heard from the roof, and outside, the anxious Julie finally heard her father's response. Now, everyone needed to clear the debris and rescue Jim and the others. Before long, one of the tourists was freed. Unfortunately, the remaining survivors were all trapped at the bottom, and rescue wouldn't be simple. The town's doctor, Christie, examined the freed survivor and confirmed he was largely unharmed. Meanwhile, Mari from the bus finally saw the convulsing man return to normal. After that, Mari and Christie looked at each other, their faces brimming with excitement. It turned out that the two were former lovers, but since Christie came here, they had not seen each other. No one expected a reunion in this place. The bus driver suggested that it was time to leave the town. Seeing the sun about to set, Jim, who was still trapped under the debris and knew the horrors of the town, urged them to go home early. But Julie wouldn't agree. If her father wasn't rescued, he would surely be killed by the night monsters. But Donna was resolute, instructing Julie to cover her father with a rainproof cloth, which might help him evade the monster's attack. Then, Donna approached the tourists again, solemnly warning them that they couldn't leave the town. If they were still out when it got dark, they would surely be killed by the monsters. But the crowd couldn't accept her smelly bullshit. Frustrated, Donna ran back to her vehicle, pulled out a shotgun, and blew out the bus tires. Some tourists were frightened and fled. Kenny then pulled out his gun, forcefully herding the tourists into the diner. By the time they had sorted everything out, it was already getting dark. Kenny approached Julie, who had just finished covering her father with the rainproof cloth, and brought her into the diner as well. Meanwhile, the town's sheriff, Boyd, was trapped in a tight space, helplessly looking at the unreachable exit. Earlier, in search of a way to leave the town, he decided to trek through the forest behind the mountain. Just as he found a high tower, a sudden rainstorm came. The mysterious boy in white appeared out of nowhere, guiding him to take shelter in a tree hollow. However, as soon as Boyd crawled in, the surroundings suddenly changed. He found himself in a bottomless well. After yelling for a long time with no response, he tried to climb up, but the walls offered no support. Boyd was trapped and fell into despair. After a long time, he heard a weak voice from above the well. Boyd recognized the voice, which was asking if he was a human. Angrily, he yelled back to confirm its question. Unexpectedly, a rope slid down the well. Boyd knew that the person above intended to rescue him. He quickly climbed up the rope. This was his only chance to escape. After using all his strength, Boyd finally emerged from the well. He quickly pulled out his gun in fear. The owner of the voice turned out to be a skinny old man, his arms chained. It was a mystery how he had managed to lower the rope. As night fell, Kenny closed the main gate. The tourists became more restless. The bus driver took charge, warning everyone that it wasn't too late to let them all go. But Donna brandished her shotgun, gesturing for everyone to stay put. She then explained once more, saying that ever since they saw that fallen tree, they couldn't leave this place anymore. The tourists couldn't help but ask how she got to know about their encounter. Donna responded that all of them in the town had seen that tree. Her ominous warning managed to calm most of the tourists. However, a tourist intended to go out and take a look. Kenny immediately stopped him because his stupidity would get them all killed. But the tourist pulled out Kenny's gun, insisting that they all go outside together. Donna was filled with anger, but the tourists had not seen any signs of danger and signaled Donna to put down her weapon, or else he would start shooting. Donna, however, said that even if he killed the deputy, she wouldn't put down her gun. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Kenny seized the opportunity to snatch his gun back. At this moment, everyone heard the harrowing screams coming from outside on the streets, showing that the demonic massacre had finally begun. Some tourists had broken away from the main group during the day, unaware of the horrors that nightfall brought. The town's resident, Fatima, wanted to warn them, but suddenly, two figures appeared from around the corner. Her boyfriend, Ellis, desperately pulled her into a room. The two figures outside the door flexed their eerie smiles, murmuring, "Open the door!" They were the legendary demons. Fatima was anxious, standing by the window and loudly warning the tourists to run, but they seemed oblivious, even shaking hands with the smiling demons. Ellis kept advising her to be rational, but her hatred for the demons reached its peak. If it wasn't for them, how could the townspeople's lives be so miserable? A young tourist couple were lucky because they had entered the town's bar, which had a talisman hanging by the door, so they didn't need to worry about demons coming in. Unfortunately, they didn't know about the taboo. Hearing the cries outside, they were discussing whether to open the door and help. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Hearing the person claiming to be from the tourist bus, the man didn't hesitate to open the door. On the other side, a demon with a smiling face approached the tour bus. After a moment of hesitation, it opened the door and stepped inside. As the interior lights flickered on, a few shadows flashed and vanished. The demon discovered living people hidden behind the seats. It rose slowly with a frozen smile, passed across rows of seats, and finally found two elderly persons hiding. In the next moment, the demon showed its true face. The occasional harrowing screams that echoed through the streets made Julie panicked, because her father was still trapped beneath the rubble, likely at the mercy of the demon. Kenny tried to calm her that they had to stay put and learn to be strong and patient. Meanwhile, Jim and a few others were in a huge predicament. This wasn't exactly a sealed space, and without the protection of a talisman, they had to maintain absolute silence. Unexpectedly, one unconscious tourist woke up. He was unaware of the terror of the demon. Realizing he was trapped beneath the debris, he began to shout in fear. The bartender who was closest to him kept urging him not to make a sound, but the heavy objects pressing down on him made it hard for him to breathe. Suddenly, he couldn't help but cough a few times, and a pool of blood flowed out. The tourist became even more nervous. His groans of pain were particularly jarring in the night. In the next moment, a demon pounced on the man, while Jim, tucked away in the corner, felt desperate. Meanwhile, in the nearby diner, everyone heard it all too clearly. Julie erupted her anxiety again. She had to save her father no matter what. Donna used all her strength to block her at the door. Julie could only collapse helplessly on the ground and burst into sobs. On the other side, Boyd managed to climb out of the dried will using a rope, only to discover that his rescuer was a gaunt, old man. Boyd was taken aback, looking around nervously, trying to figure out where he was. He was shocked to find several long-dead corpses affixed to the surrounding walls. Only the old man before him was still clinging to life, yet he had lost the will to live. He explained that after crawling into a tree hole, he had ended up in a demon's den. He had been hanging there, living a life worse than death, for 10 years. The old man only wished that Boyd would end his misery with a gunshot, but Boyd wanted to save him. He then pulled out a talisman and threw it at the chains. Suddenly, pleasing music started playing from outside. The old man urged Boyd to leave quickly because he knew the demons would appear before the music stopped. Boyd discovered that the sound came from a music box, but had no idea how it started playing. Regardless, he was determined to save the old man. Just as he managed to break a chain, the music in the distance was nearing its end. The old man felt a severe pain coursing through his body and couldn't help but double over. Boyd hurriedly came forward to support him, only to see countless protrusions moving under the skin of the man's arm. Suddenly, the old man acted like a different person, swinging his arm and grabbing Boyd's shoulder. Boyd used all his strength to push him away, only to find that the old man had stopped breathing. He had to pick up a torch and shakily walk out of the stone chamber. To his surprise, he found himself still in the forest. Under the cover of the night, he couldn't even distinguish between east and west, let alone find his way back to the town. Just then, a hunting dog appeared out of nowhere and jumped in front of Boyd, as if to lead him on his way. Sadly, the dog disappeared not far from the starting point. Boyd quickly extinguished the torch in his hand and curled up behind a large tree. A few demons were walking towards him from the depths of the woods. Boyd panicked as beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. Perhaps due to the talisman, the group of demons did not notice his presence. On the other side, Victor and Tabitha had also just escaped from the demon's lair. Seeing that they couldn't make it back to the town before dark, Victor was surprisingly calm. After traversing a distance with Tabitha, they arrived at an abandoned truck. He opened the cargo door and the two quickly climbed in. To their surprise, this was one of Victor's hideouts. There was electric lighting inside, and also some expired foods. Victor advised Tabitha that as long as they stayed quiet inside, they shouldn't attract the terrifying demons. Tabitha was puzzled, and asked him why he had these supplies in the wilderness. Victor told her that his mother had brought him to this place when he was young, and over time he stored a lot of supplies here. While they were talking, there were footsteps outside, and then the door was pushed open. It was Boyd who had fled here, and he had a talisman with him. It seemed they could have a worry-free night. Suddenly, a figure in the distance was shouting for help. The man was being followed by several demons. They beckoned for the man to hurry in, and managed to close the truck door before the demons caught up. Elgin, who had a lucky escape, turned out to be from the tour bus visiting the town. He had previously had a premonition and forced the bus to stop, saving everyone. After realizing that Elgin meant no harm, everyone began to keep themselves busy. Boyd bandaged the wounds caused by the strange old man, while Victor started to doodle. He said he often saw strange things in his dreams, and hence recorded them to prevent them from being forgotten. To the amazement of Boyd and Tabitha, the content of the drawings had all become reality. Later, a ray of sunlight shone in through the door gap. Dawn had finally arrived. The radio in the diner sounded once again. The passengers who had been up all night were inevitably a bit worn out. Seeing the terrifying night was finally over, Julie bolted out of the diner at top speed and was beside the rubble where her father lay in no time. She called out her dad with hope. Jim, who was under the rubble, seemed to sense her call and responded with difficulty, opening his eyes. Donna quickly called everyone to clear the debris. Only a few noticed the mutilated corpse lying on the ground. The bus driver returned to the bus, only to see the glaring blood stains and the scattered bodies of two elderly people in the back row. On the other side, Tabitha, who had just left the truck, learned from Elgin that the house next to the diner had collapsed. She realized that it was her house and ran towards the town as fast as she could. Boyd was just about to follow her when he saw several bumps moving under his skin. He was horrified, thinking that he might had he been infected after being scratched by the old man. Sometime later, Boyd finally returned safely to the town. The moving bumps on his arm had mysteriously disappeared. However, his experiences over the past few days were too bizarre. Even his own son Ellis found it hard to accept. How could one enter a tree hole and instantly teleport to another place? And what about Sarah, the girl who had been following him? Boyd stuttered, not knowing how to explain. Ellis suddenly became emotionally charged. His father asked what was wrong. Ellis then realized that he had lost his composure because of the demonic massacre the previous night. His girlfriend Fatima was on the verge of emotional collapse. Now, hearing that his father had not found any clues to leave the town, he couldn't help but feel anxious and angry. Boyd wisely reminded his son to propose to his girlfriend, to become the hope in her heart. Ellis had an epiphany and said that he would go to the forest to pick some wildflowers for his bride-to-be. The passengers outside the diner, despite the demonic event of the previous night, hadn't curbed their self-righteous behavior. Some insisted on carrying guns for self-defense. Donna strongly opposed this, as it could incite panic among the other residents. As the two were arguing, Boyd arrived to defuse the situation, declaring that no one was allowed to carry firearms within the town, a rule he set as the town's sheriff. If anyone didn't want to comply, he suggested they spend the night in the forest outside the town. The passenger, Randall, finally threw down his gun and retreated back into the crowd. Donna arranged for the group of passengers to stay temporarily in the colony house. Then she started complaining about the situation to Boyd. The previous heavy rain had destroyed half of the crops, and the remaining supplies had to be reduced, and there were 25 passengers in total. Apart from the dozen or so people living in the diner, there were still 3 missing, and their bodies hadn't been found. After venting her grievances, Donna asked Boyd what he had experienced in the forest. Boyd just looked at her but didn't say anything, because he knew he couldn't voice his concerns and add to the worries. The only person Boyd could confide in was his wife, Abby, who had passed away many years ago. He was so surprised that the old man he encountered earlier somehow knew his wife's name. Ellis was picking wildflowers for his girlfriend in the forest. Kenny happened to pass by to check the animal traps, but he couldn't find the iron rod that was supposed to prop up the traps. Suddenly, a faint, singing voice came from afar. The two of them quickly ran over, only to find a girl with an iron rod sticking out of her head, a phone in front of her playing music. They were debating whether or not to carry the body back to town when the girl suddenly took a breath. Unexpectedly, she was still alive. Kenny ran back to seek help, while Ellis stayed to take care of the injured girl. It turns out that last night, while hiding in the bar with her boyfriend, someone knocked on the door. To their horror, it was a smiling demon. The demon dragged the girl and her boyfriend into the forest for what it called a fun game. When she woke up, she was in her current state. Soon after, Kenny arrived with the town doctor. Christy examined the girl and found that the iron rod had gone straight through her head, with the end fixed in the tree trunk. Christy was astonished by that, and she told her 2 companions that the girl was beyond saving. Her survival up to this point was a miracle. The only thing they could do was end her pain sooner. The girl seemed to sense her impending death, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Christy was frank to her, asking her if she had any last wishes. The girl said she wanted to call her mother. Christy regretfully informed her that there was no signal here, and they couldn't use a mobile phone. Amid her disappointment, she heard a faint calling. The next moment, she felt a sharp pain in her forehead. Just as everyone was at a loss, Boyd came to check the situation. He walked over to the girl, gripping the rod. The moment Boyd pulled it out, her screams stopped abruptly. Her death gave a considerable shock to the people present, but the sin and burden were borne alone by Boyd. Later, he found Donna and told her that when he was fighting abroad, the vehicle he was in was hit by a missile. His best friend was blasted to half his body, and his name was the same as the girl and her boyfriend. Because of the coincidence, Boyd began to suspect that the town must be an illusion. Donna noticed Boyd's abnormality and asked what he had experienced in the forest. Seeing that Boyd was still unwilling to reveal, all she could do was to encourage him to pull himself together because the townspeople couldn't lose hope. Boyd promised her. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Jim was finally rescued from the pit. However, he had broken 2 ribs. Christy warned him to stop causing trouble and lie down to recover. But after sending his children out of the room, Jim eagerly asked his wife about what she had discovered in the basement. Tabitha did not dare to tell him about the demon's lair she had found. Instead, she said that the wire in the basement was actually disconnected, and she had no idea where the town's electricity was coming from. As soon as Tabitha left, Jim struggled to get up, wanting to check why the sign at the door was still lit. Just as he was climbing onto the stool, he bumped into a volunteer who had come to help at the clinic. After learning that the volunteer had been trapped in the town with the bus yesterday, Jim's curiosity was piqued, and he began asking many questions. He then discovered that Christy and Mari before him were a couple. This information made Jade fall into deep thought. As Tabitha and her daughter were packing up their clothes to go home, Tabitha suddenly stopped. She saw two pale-faced children staring at her, but her daughter Julie saw nothing. Tabitha panicked and pulled her daughter away from the scene. Upon returning home, she saw her young son playing with blocks at the door. At first, she didn't notice anything strange, but when the blocks took shape, Tabitha was stunned. The structure her son had built was exactly the same as the millstone in the underground cave. The two strange boys she had encountered earlier also reappeared. Without giving it much thought, she quickly pulled her son back into the room. Meanwhile, Victor returned home to find his room ransacked as if it had been plundered. Even his beloved violin was missing. Luckily, the woman next door told him that Jade had been there the night before. Victor ran downstairs, and sure enough, he heard the sound of a violin from Jade's room. He angrily took back the toy that had been with him throughout his childhood, reprimanding Jade for taking his things without permission. Seeing Victor leave in anger, Jade chased after him to explain. Jade often saw strange illusions, especially those odd circular symbols. He had seen many similar symbols in an old notebook interspersed with a blurred photograph. The photo's background was a young Victor, which made him wonder what secrets Victor's home held. Perhaps they could find clues to escape the town. Victor stared at the old photo for a long time, then told him that he shouldn't have touched this before leaving. Elgin, the bus passenger who had just settled into the colony house, cautiously asked Fatima if there were any lakes or rivers nearby. Somewhat puzzled, she took him to a lake in the back mountain and asked how he knew about the lake since he had only arrived in town a few days ago. Elgin claimed he saw it in a dream. Fatima wasn't surprised at all since many residents in the town had similar experiences, but they hadn't figured out the cause yet. The most typical case was the town girl Sarah, who could even communicate with mysterious entities. Meanwhile, Kenny returned to his old house and suddenly heard faint noises coming from the basement. Alarmed, he drew his pistol and descended the stairs, exploring around. In the dark corner, he saw a figure. It was Sarah, whom was supposed to team with Boyd to seek rescue previously. Kenny immediately reported the matter to Boyd, who was shocked and rushed to the basement of the church where Sarah was, his mind full of questions. Boyd held back his words and sent his deputy away. There were too many secrets between him and Sarah. He was curious to know where Sarah had gone after he had entered the tree hole. To his surprise, Sarah stated that after she entered the tree hole, she was directly teleported here. Although surprised, Boyd didn't doubt her because the strange old man had said that the tree hole could teleport people to random locations. Boyd considered himself lucky to have ended up at the dry well, while the old man was teleported straight into the monster's lair. Boyd then asked her how she knew the tree hole could teleport people. Sarah said a little boy in white told her. Boyd thought of Sarah's ability to communicate with demons and wondered if the boy in white might also be a demon. However, Sarah denied it, believing the boy was different. He was also trapped in the town. Boyd decided to first solve the problem at hand. In the eyes of the townspeople, Sarah was a vicious murderer. Boyd first sought out his deputy, Kenny, intending to reveal some information about her. Sarah had the ability to communicate with demons, and her previous killings were done under their influence. Despite the grave mistakes she had committed, she might be their only hope to escape this mysterious town. This was also why the now-deceased priest insisted on hiding her in the basement, sparing her from punishment. But Kenny still thought that Sarah should be punished for her killings. Seeing this, Boyd swallowed the words he was about to say. If he were to reveal that Kenny's father was also caused to death by Sarah, Kenny might become even more furious. He then suggested locking Sarah in a cage to die at the hands of a demon. Boyd was upset upon hearing that, but he suddenly felt dizzy and realized that his skin was starting to bulge and move again, causing him to stumble and fall to the ground. After a thorough check by Christy, no abnormalities were found. Christy knew that Boyd had a mild case of epilepsy and advised him not to put too much pressure on himself. If his condition worsened, he might start to have hallucinations. Boyd was just about to get up and leave, but quickly sat back down. It seemed there was indeed something wrong with him. Suddenly there was a commotion in the hall. It turned out that Tabitha had come to visit her husband. Not seeing him on the bed, she asked Mari and found out that Jim had gone out for some air again. She felt her husband should not keep wandering around. However, Jim looked worried. During his recovery days, he had pieced together all the clues about the town and realized that the town is actually a damned experimental project. Jim had once been involved in a roller coaster construction project. The more unexpected elements there were, the stronger the passengers' reactions would be. And this town was full of surprises, broken power lines, the meeting of Christy and her partner Mari, etc. It was as if someone had deliberately designed it to watch everyone's reactions. What's more, just a few minutes before the storm, the voice over the radio knew Jim's name, and even predicted that Tabitha digging a hole would lead to the house collapsing. It felt like everything was a prearranged script. Jim decided to share this discovery with Donna, as she had also heard the voice over the radio, but after hearing Jim's speculation, she immediately told him not to spread this around unless more truth was uncovered, because it would cause panic among residents, and it was hard to determine whether the person speaking over the radio was friend or foe. Jim thought this made sense, so he planned to connect the radio again to see if he could get more information. At this time, Jim's 2 children had also arrived at the colony house. The young boy, Ethan, went straight into the room of the strange man, Victor. He wanted to apologize to Victor that he shouldn't have brought Jade here, leading to Victor losing his beloved violin. Victor was still sulking on his own. Ethan had no choice but to put down the paintbrushes he had collected and quietly walk away. Julie had to follow her younger brother and leave. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the hall. It was the bus passenger who had moved in, clashing with the old residents. Randall reprimanded the other for not to meddle with his stuff. Although his actions were justified, Donna was filled with anger. No fights or brawls were allowed in the colony house, and the image of the demon breaking in a few months ago was still vivid in her mind. She had to nip any potential threat in the bud and expel this troublemaker. Seeing that Randall was lying there unmoved, Donna swung her huge axe at him. This action scared him greatly. He hastily packed his backpack and fled from the colony house. Fortunately, Donna didn't send him straight to his death. Instead, she sent him to settle down in the bus. Looking at the blood stains on the floor, the man felt a little scared. Donna took out an amulet and reminded him never to take it off and not to open the door if he heard a knock. Seeing that he was scared like a chicken, Donna maliciously reminded him that the bus had no curtains and he would definitely see a different scenery at night. After closing the car door, she left without looking back. Meanwhile, the bus driver felt very guilty because all of the passengers taking her bus were trapped in this damned town. She had planned to submit her resignation last week, but kept delaying it, and somehow ended up here. Jade, sitting nearby, raised his glass to assure her that they should work together to leave this town. On the other side, Boyd walked into the police station, only to see the deceased priest suddenly appear out of thin air. He kept telling himself that it must be a hallucination, but the priest was very much alive and asked Boyd how he planned to tell Kenny that it was Sarah who killed Kenny's father. But Boyd still preferred to protect Sarah because she could communicate with the demon. But the priest warned Boyd that Kenny might find out the truth one day, and it would pose a great threat to the town's stability. He also urged Boyd to learn how to make choices as the town's sheriff. Unknown to him, Kenny had actively sought out Sarah. He needed to understand more to align his views with Boyd. Sarah admitted she had made many mistakes, and it was too late to turn back. Kenny said his mother treated her like her own daughter, and she doesn't want Sarah to be seen as a criminal by the residents. Hearing this, Sarah's guilt intensified, and she finally admitted that she was the one who opened the door on the night Kenny's father was killed by the demon. When Boyd arrived at the church, he was told that the deputy had gone to the clinic. At this time, Kenny was standing blankly in the place where his father was killed. He remembered when his father was first diagnosed with dementia. He suggested that his father stay in the clinic for better care. Despite his dad's insistence on going home, his mom forced him to stay. Little did they know that not long after, his father would be killed by a monster that suddenly broke in. Both Kenny and his mother fell into deep self-blame. After learning that Sarah was the one who let the demon in, Kenny was completely unsettled. He wanted Sarah to receive the punishment she deserved. Boyd tried to dissuade him, stating that he had known about this for a while, but there were reasons for not punishing Sarah. This made Kenny even more furious, and he angrily tore off his badge and stormed off. Later that night, Randall, sleeping in the bus, was on the brink of a breakdown. Outside, the bus was surrounded by monsters, waiting for their chance to prey. Though the talisman stones could prevent them from breaking in, he couldn't bear their menacing stares. He cussed non-stop inside the bus until dawn, when the disgruntled demons finally withdrew. Also sleep-deprived was the eccentric Jade. He felt that some old photos communicated crucial information. Suddenly, the man in the photo appeared out of nowhere, holding a strange, blood-stained pattern. The sight gave Jade a start, but he soon realized it was just a hallucination. He was not satisfied and arranged all the bottles in the bar to mimic the pattern's outline, trying to understand its peculiarity. Suddenly, the bar door was pushed open. It was Victor who came seeking help. It turned out Victor wanted him to perform a song, but not in the bar. Jade couldn't fathom the request, but followed silently, curious to see what Victor was up to. Unconsciously, they passed through a forest. Jade was shocked at the sight of a large number of scrapped cars parked on an open ground. These were the cars that had accidentally entered the town earlier. But why had Victor moved them here? Victor led Jade to a red off-road vehicle. It was his mother's car. Whenever he was scared as a child, his mother would play a song for him. The recent bizarre incidents in the town reminded Victor of past experiences, and he felt panic rising again. He hoped that Jade could play that familiar tune like his mother. As the melodious notes filled the air, Victor closed his eyes. The gentle breeze felt like his mother's warm embrace, easing his anxiety. When the song ended, Victor started to fulfill his promise. He pointed out the man's name in the old photo and said that the red car was the man's vehicle. Initially, the man was a very cheerful person, loved by the townspeople, but after seeing the strange symbols on a page, his demeanor changed dramatically. He never smiled again. One day, Victor's mother hid him in a place unknown even to the man, looking panic-stricken. When he woke up the next day, all the people in the town had met untimely ends. Due to the trauma, Victor became paranoid. He firmly believed that a mysterious force in the town could change people's behavior and lead them to do bad things, and Sarah was one of the manipulated victims. At the moment, Jim and Tabitha stormed into the church, furious at Boyd's protection of her. They were infuriated because Sarah had not only killed several residents, but had also tried to harm their son, Ethan. Despite their anger, Boyd insisted that Sarah, who could communicate with demons, might be the key to understanding the town's mysterious happenings. He hoped she would be given a chance to reform. Sarah was filled with remorse, blaming her actions on being bewitched by the devil. Tabitha, however, was unwilling to hear any explanations and stormed off after throwing a harsh word. Sheriff Boyd realized the seriousness of the situation. He decided to consult Donna. Sarah left the church and went to her former residence. The living room setup was nearly the same, especially the jacket on the chair, which felt familiar. Suddenly, a strange man approached her, questioning why she intruded into his home. It turned out that during the time Sarah was gone, her house had been given to someone else. Sarah quickly explained that she just wanted to retrieve some important items, but the stranger informed her that all her personal belongings had been moved to the storage room at the diner. Feeling like an outcast, Sarah hurriedly left her former residence. On the other side, Boyd found Donna in the colony house. After he detailed Sarah's predicament, Donna said that anyone who committed wrongdoings should be put in a cage to face the demon, according to the rules set down by Boyd himself. They couldn't possibly break these rules for an elusive reason. Realizing that even Donna didn't support him, Boyd stormed off in a huff. Donna added that if they didn't punish Sarah, what would happen to those she had hurt? Indeed, since Ethan heard of Sarah's return, he had been hiding in his room, too scared to see anyone. As Jim and Tabitha were discussing what to do, Ethan suddenly opened his room door, expressing his wish to see Sarah. He remembered his mother's teaching that everyone must have the courage to face their fears, as that's the only way to strip the enemy of their power. These words greatly comforted Tabitha. Meanwhile, Sarah, who was hovering near the diner, was contemplating whether to go in when Jim and his son approached her. The fear in Ethan had disappeared. He solemnly told Sarah that they were once good friends, and even